So, I was thinking the other day that from time to time there could be people. It's entirely possible that they're brand new. They just bought their first Tesla, or they're thinking
Mhm.
about buying their first Tesla, or they've bought their first shares, or they're thinking about buying their first shares, or they're looking at these all the stuff going on around Elon Musk, and they're going, I need to learn more about this Tesla thing, and they've just found us.
Mhm.
This is their first time on or the second time on. So this guy over here, am I pointing the right way? I don't even know. I don't know whether you have to point the. He's Bradford Ferguson. He is an extremely competent manager of other people's money. That's what he does for a living, and he particularly likes people that have $1 million or more in Tesla,
Mhm.
and then therefore they're called Teslanaires.
That's
And
right.
your division of your company is called Rebellionaires.
That's right.
Do I have all that right?
Yeah, so our primary business is Halter Ferguson Financial, and we have clients that we run diversified money for, but there's also a large group of Teslanaires who are essentially all in Tesla and have been for years. And we offer this Rebellionaire service to assist them with their their journey, whether it's all in or 50% in Tesla or 20%, however that looks for them.
All right. So there you go. I wanted to make sure that, because there's new people coming in all the time.
Hmm.
So I wanted to get into one thing. The first thing I wanted to get into was this article that came out today. Well, I wasn't really, again, it's not that much new,
Hmm.
extremely relevant for this moment.
Right.
I think that's why they put it back out again. And Tesla Boomer Mama was the one that was the first to post it. And basically, the argument comes down to that Rohan, I forget his first name right now,
Rohan Patel.
Rohan Patel, that's his first name, right? Rohan Patel. The Rohan Patel tells the story that a while back in the C-suite, he and two other executives were basically arguing with Elon that the robotaxi business, the cybercab business, was not going to be as big as he thought it was going to be and wasn't going to develop as quickly as he thought it was going to develop. And that they thought it would be very, very important to do the Model 2, Model Q, Model, whatever you want to name you put
Or
on it,
Tesla Q.
Tesla Q, or the affordable vehicle, whatever this
Mhm.
vehicle is going to be. And that the three of them ended up leaving shortly after that because Elon put his foot down and said he wanted the robotaxi Cybertruck to be the emphasis, that he believed that was the future of the company.
Mhm.
And that maybe somewhere along the line between now and then, the Model 2 Q affordable car has been killed, that it's no longer a thing. And that whatever they've been talking about as late as 3 months ago is maybe just a stripped down version of the Model Y or something, like
Mhm.
what they call the Mexican version. So where are you on all of that? What's your current flavor of your understanding or your speculation on all that?
Yeah, so we're growing more and more concerned that uh, the more affordable models are simply stripped down versions of existing Teslas. So decontented, where you uh, add cloth seats and things like that. So we may have gotten our first taste of it with the Cybertruck and the 70,000 version of it, which has like cloth seats, no rear um, display, no rear or front light bar. So it's much different. Also doesn't have electrical outlets throughout the Cybertruck, so or under the bed storage. Um, so a lot of Tesla investors have been hoping for the compact to come
Mhm.
because globally the market for compacts or smaller SUVs is pretty big. In the US, we like our larger SUVs, but there is a significant market for smaller cars in the US as well.
Mhm.
And like Gary Black and others, I also agree that there's a huge market for smaller vehicles. I think Tesla could do up to 5 million per year
Wow.
with a compact.
Mhm.
So I think it's key that they produce something that's smaller. And if you're going to go into self-driving cars, you might as well have a smaller car. And we've seen that with the Cybercab, which only has two doors and two seats, because most rideshare rides are with one person. And when most people use their cars, it's with one person in the car.
Sure.
So why do you need so many seats for most rides?
So you're now concerned. Do you think that they will, well, they'll certainly be pushed on it on Tuesday. Do you think they will give us satisfaction on Tuesday as to what is truly going to be next? At least that it's going to be a completely new vehicle versus a stripped down model?
I think they could at least say if it's going to be completely new model, like a novel
Right.
model, not like it's stripped down so it's new. That's not really new. That's
Not just a trim, but an
yeah.
actual. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they could say that without spoiling anything.
Okay.
Because I think if they come out with a compact, you don't talk about it until they're actually making them and rolling them off the line so that you don't Osborne any three or Y unnecessarily.
Mhm. Now, I believe you have a fairly strong and high valuation for the robotaxi.
Mhm.
So uh, do you see what Rohan's concerns are? Are you at least uh, thinking that he could have a point, that it might roll out slower, that it might not be able to get as much revenue per unit as Kathy Wood, for instance, has said, and that Elon has endorsed the Kathy Wood analysis?
My concern is that it rolls out slower than people hope. So with Austin, there's a limit. I don't know if that's 250 or 2,500 that they can run at a time. So there's a limit to it, and there's a limit to how quickly it can grow from there. And we don't know what those limits are per city in Texas. I think it would be great if Tesla laid out the size and speed of the robotaxi in the shape of the robotaxi rollout in Texas, but also what to expect in California, how Florida might be different, and how other cities might generally be different, just so we can understand it and Wall Street can begin to model it out. It's important for them to model out because it's my belief, I could be wrong, but I don't think suddenly Chicago is going to allow them to do 10,000 uh, Model Y or 3 running as robotaxis, without a safety driver.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Tesla's just going to be allowed to turn on a switch and do 10,000 suddenly. It so I would agree there would be a limit to how quickly the rollout happens, and I think it'd be good if Tesla shared what they know,
Mm-hmm.
and so investors can know what to expect.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
But I do disagree on profitability.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's hard for me to come to that number, especially after Robert Scoble's reporting that people are paying more for a Waymo than they're paying for an Uber, and the
Mm,
cost is less. So, and I don't think you're going to have I don't think you're going to have the advertising cost that these guys have had in order to get the thing going, because they've got 7 million uh, uh, enthusiastic car owners.
mhm,
They've got 10 million retail shareholders.
right.
They've got another bunch of shareholders that are not retail, that have it in their pensions.
Mhm.
Then they have just the enthusiasts that don't own a car or own the stock, but are just enthusiasts. So it seems to me that they've got a built-in group of folks that when it comes to their town, they'll be very excited to choose the Tesla as opposed to an Uber or a Lyft or a Waymo.
Yeah, and I don't know how much research Tesla had when the C-suite was having this discussion, but for Uber and Lyft, a majority of the rides are working class people commuting to and from work who do not have enough vehicles in their household to cover everyone. Or it could be someone who shouldn't really be driving, whether it's a bad driving record or some kind of disability. It could be someone who's an immigrant
Mhm.
and doesn't have a driver's license, things like that. Um, so those people, they don't have to be early adopters, but they are looking for affordable transportation. So if Tesla offers it at a lower price than Uber and Lyft, I think Tesla is going to have plenty of demand for the service. And furthermore, Uber did the study where they looked at what if we drop the price to $1 per mile?
Mhm.
And what they found was demand wasn't just like 2 times as much, it was 20 times higher than their normal prices. 20 times.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And Tesla doesn't even need to start at that price, but Teslas would be very profitable even at $1 a mile.
Very
I
much.
forget our exact math on that, but I think it's bare minimum at least 20 grand per year in profit per car. I think it's higher than that, but um, that would be the minimum, I think.
Yeah, I mean, most Kathy would and others, maybe you too. I know when I did my numbers, come in at a cost of about 25 to 35 cents per mile. So if you're charging $1, you get, let's call it 65 cents of profit. And most people think and that counts your deadhead miles. So if you got 40,000, if you can get 40,000 of real miles, that's $30,000 to, the $28,000, $27,000 of profit right there. And again, there
That's
may
per
be
vehicle.
that's per
Yeah.
vehicle, and you can go with market rates, which may mean that on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, you're charging $3 a mile, and on during rush hour on Monday morning, you're only charging $1.50 a mile. So
Mm.
there's all kinds of ways that you can play that depending on the customer. But yeah, it's just a
And yeah, just don't even look at the robovan. So you,
right.
you have large stretches of road where many people are riding the same stretch of road. So
Right.
you can funnel people to a parking lot and then they hop into a robovan. They take that to the end of a stretch, a long stretch, and then they all disperse into their robo taxis and get to their final destination.
Yeah. The
Or they
final,
hop onto the next robovan that takes another long stretch.
the final mile problem becomes a lot different when you're talking about an electric vehicle with no driver in it. Yeah, yeah, that all changes. Yeah. Well, that's probably going to be the number one issue on Tuesday that everybody I talk to thinks that's the number one issue. I think batteries are another big issue and whatnot, but there's also going to be this whole thing. I don't know. They do it every quarter. They want to know, you know, everybody wants to know how much money they made. So I know you guys always come up with a number. So what are you guys thinking? I don't know if you have them all three in your head, but revenue, margin, EPS.
EPS, where Matt's at 30 cents a share,
Okay.
and I'm under that. My sense is you take the Model Y down, the production, that's your biggest seller, it's your biggest source of profits. I think that'll hurt them quite a bit financially. So my spidey sense is that it'll be less than 30 cents per share. We'll see what happens.
Okay, well, you guys are kind of in the range. So I think AJ, for instance, I think is at 35 or 37. Other people are around 35, but the street is at 45.
Mm.
So what happens to the stock initially when the earnings come out before the call? If you're right, do we get a big drop off? Or is it?
I think it'll hurt. The main question is who's going to be left to react that is going to sell at this price. So you could get some kind of reaction, but it may be limited compared to the news. And I gotta think this quarter is going to be the worst quarter in a very long time. Model Y production and sales are much improved this quarter.
Sure, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And profitability will be much better. And
yeah, and we had some really great news out of California. The headline didn't make it good news. The headline says, "Oh, sales are off 15% in California for the first quarter." But if you
Mhm,
look into the headline, you look past the headline, Model 3 sales were up, and not just a little bit. They were up nicely. So
mhm,
the car that was available to buy in the first quarter in California, the left-leaning state, uh,
mhm,
where the brand damage would theoretically be the worst of any state in the union,
mhm.
and where the cars have sold, the most over the years, they were actually up on the Model 3. That to me is a pretty good data, piece of data.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, all right. So then also on Tuesday, is there anything that you are thinking besides an announcement that the Model Q is really just the Mexican version? Other than that, is there anything else that you would worry that he could say that they could say in their notes, or that Elon could announce, that might really hurt the stock or help the stock?
I think that'd be the main thing. I feel like the questions on say were decent. So people are asking about the batteries, they're asking about robotaxi. I think there's even a question about Optimus in there. So if they take the topics and just think of, okay, what can we tell investors to set expectations and reveal our progress, I think that would be a positive for them to share. We feel like we're a little negative or bearish going into the call itself. We don't feel like we're going to get any sudden big surprises, but I guess one potential upside surprise would be if they talk about 4680 and talk about how they've solved all the problems with it and are, rapidly and aggressively scaling additional lines for it and give a great update around what they're doing with lithium, with cathode
Right.
production, how that flows into 4680. I think that would be a a potential positive that bulls would understand, but I think, Wall Street may not understand.
Yeah, yeah, they should. The battery thing is like, I mean, they're basically a battery company who wraps things around the battery to sell. That's,
Mhm.
that's what they're basically, the
We did
business
get a new Optimus picture
picture.
today.
Yeah.
I put it as my
Oh, I see. I just,
wallpaper, my nerdy wallpaper on my phone. I don't know if that's the next generation Optimus or not. And Optimus is looking at something.
you're gonna have to pull it
Oh
back.
wait, I got to put it
Yes,
back on.
there you go.
Looking at something that might be like the rear light bar on the Model
Oh, okay,
Y
okay.
or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Cyber Cab. We don't know.
Well,
Um, Go ahead.
pretty good design.
Yeah.
Nice looking design.
Look, it doesn't look even though it's dark in color, it doesn't look imposing, doesn't have like big scary shoulders or anything like that. A little update on Optimus would be good.
Be
They don't
lovely,
have to spoil anything to allow competitors to, catch them or, do any wrinkles, but progress on that and how they're intending to deploy it in factories later this year.
right? Right. Yeah, or maybe that there are already X number deployed.
Yeah.
That would be great, because they said the first out is that first out was a couple of weeks ago. So if they've got first article by now, they could have made 100, or a couple of hundred. Yeah, that would be.
What what's the speed of the Optimus compared to a human worker? That would be good to know. It'll speed up over time, but
Sure.
it'd be good to know where it is today.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
many hours a day it can work.
Yep. Yep. how long between charges. I know the
Mhm.
last time they showed us it was backing into a charger, but people have talked about a lot of different ways that this charger might work.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with regard to Optimus I would love to know. So there's the need to knows and the want to knows, and
Yeah.
my want to know list is extremely long.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
All right. So then there's the question of the tariff story. So this is now we're getting into the macro as opposed to
Mhm.
the specifics of Tesla. So we have a macro story going on right now. The biggest macro story on the street, maybe bonds are still as big, but maybe they've taken a little bit of a back seat. So just for fun, because I'll forget it if I don't do it, you are you became the bond expert last week. And I quoted you over and over and over again last week on bonds.
Mhm.
So I was a little bit shocked to see bonds go up, the yields to go up today. I
Mhm.
thought we would just kind of slowly keep chiseling away. Have you dug in any more to see who in the heck is selling all these bonds or why there's no buyers?
There was a story out that a hedge fund blew up, and what they were doing was they were going to Japan because interest rates are very low in Japan. This is
Right.
called the carry trade. They were going over to Japan and they were borrowing a bunch of money over in Japan, and then they would convert that to dollars and buy US Treasury bonds, the 10-year bond. And they were so levered, they were 50 times levered, this one fund was. So like, some bank was allowing them to do that or whatever. And if you're 50 times levered, essentially as soon as you lose 10% or 2%, you got to liquidate your whole portfolio. So as soon as the rates moved up on the 10-year in a drastic way, the value of those bonds goes down and then they're forced to liquidate them. So there was at least one hedge fund doing that, probably multiple ones that were
Yeah,
doing the carry trade. So that was a little bit of a repeat of what happened around August 5th of last year.
I remember. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So may have been, according to this one story, at least that may have been a little happened in a very unusual time to make it look like maybe the Chinese were playing games with us as part of the tit for tat that's going on, but
Yeah.
maybe not after all, huh?
Yeah. And there were other players like us selling bonds to buy stocks.
Right, right.
In order for us to buy stocks, we gotta either use cash or we gotta sell some bonds, and that's called rebalancing.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's what we did. And
Okay.
this was, more for our diversified clients that we
Sure,
did
sure,
that.
sure. Yeah. All right. So then there's the tariff story, which is totally controlling the market other than bonds the last week. Um, so I think we mentioned last week that Brian Wong, who will be on tomorrow night, I think, that Brian Wong has been talking about the tariffs and Tesla, saying he thinks that in both cases, all the bad news is in. Now,
Mhm.
we talked about one other piece of bad news would be the Model 2 being not what we think. But in terms of the tariff thing, I'm hard pressed, other than to have China just say, you know what, we're done. We're not gonna talk anymore. I think that all the bad news is in, or virtually all the bad news is in on tariffs. That we're more likely to be looking at a good news ramp over the next month or so. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it feels that way, and we're going to talk some more about that. I feel like we've reached a point of maximum fear and uncertainty. This reminds me a bit of the crisis that we had in 2020, the health crisis that we had.
Yeah,
You know what I'm talking about. And what happened was, people were talking about depression,
right.
and this was around, I think, March 23rd or so. We were talking about depression, and people were selling stocks. It was really bad start to the year. Essentially, it went like this to start the year. I don't know if markets were down like 25% or something like that.
Very rapidly.
Yeah, it was a pretty brutal sell-off. And then later that night, Trump comes out and he says, I want to get America back to work again. So, a lot of workplaces were shut down, and immediately the market was up 10% the next day. Like you
Right.
couldn't buy it at the old prices. Like suddenly it's up 10%. And that was the end of it. That was the end of it. It was the bottom.
I
So I
I
feel
happen
like we've
I
reached
happen
that
to make a
point
lot of money.
already.
I happen to make a lot of money. And that was one of my best 2 or 3 days of trading ever.
Good.
Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah. Well, t Tesla bottomed, I believe it was March 18th or March 17th. It bottomed. It briefly went under $400 a share, and this is before all
Blitz.
the splits. So, that would have been like 26 dollars a share or something like that. It went below $26 a share for a day or so, and that was it. Like that was the cheapest you could have got it
Yeah.
that year.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're looking at maybe the fear is all in at this point. Go ahead. We can talk
Yeah.
about the VIX.
Yeah.
Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna I'm gonna share my screen
Sure.
briefly.
Most people don't probably use the VIX.
And I shared this on my X account a couple days ago. I'm a former stock options market maker, so that makes me a little dangerous. And what you have happen in these crises is like the crisis technically for the great financial crisis started in late it 2007, so it was October 2007, and um, but you get to this point where suddenly people panic. It happens all at once. People panic. It also happened in 2020 with the health crisis. And then more recently, the VIX spiked. And what you should notice about this spike here is I'm forgetting what it is actually, but right here, this is from the European banking crisis that happened because of Greek bonds.
Okay.
But this was not from COVID, this
Okay.
one here. Um, what so what you should know is like there's no double spike in
Yeah.
the fear. So we have another one in 2020. There wasn't a bigger spike in fear after the bottom. And I don't think this crisis is as big as the
Right.
financial crisis
Right.
or how bad things got in 2020 with all the people dying and
Right.
all that. And we'll likely have a supply chain problem. So
Mhm.
that'll be similar, but it's going to be different.
Very different.
So this VIX looks like it has peaked, and so while we could grind lower in the market, that's possible,
Mhm.
but it's not going to be some sudden rapid descent. So I'm pretty confident that the bottom is in on the stock market.
So there's another rule that people look at,
Okay.
those who are, digging deeper than the average person out there, and that's the whole business of something being of the fear, not just the fear being in, but also the negativity being in. So
Right.
the Bank of America announcing that the mutual fund buyers or the mutual fund analysts
Managers, yeah.
managers are the most bearish that they've been, I think, in 20 years or something. I forget,
Mm.
but it's like a long, long time. So typically there's this rule that when you have that kind of bearishness in, you're also looking at a bottom and that
Right.
the bull is around the corner. So is that something that you guys use too as a theory?
Yeah, it's a helpful contrarian indicator when bearishness is high and everybody is moved over to that side of the table, then typically that means people are done selling and have capitulated or they have positioned themselves. So then that leaves a lot of room for for a snapback. Um, so, typically those are strong contrarian indicators.
Yeah, so my theory, I don't know if we talked about this last week. My theory is that this will be an even steeper V recovery than the COVID recovery, or any maybe any any recovery that has a 20% down in the S&P. But it can take as little as about 4 months to recover fully and get back to all-time highs on the S&P. And so I'm kind of looking at maybe under 4 months, maybe 2.5 to 3 months. By the end of May, going into June, we might be fully recovered and back on the way on the bull. But that's I'm a Pollyannish kind of guy.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say to get that, we need some positive news of some deals being made and um, a strong sense that our allies are with the United States and not with China.
Well, now we did have an ally sitting down with Trump today, a long
Mhm.
press conference with Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy,
Italy. Mhm.
who's best buds with Elon Musk. Some people have thought that maybe there was a romance budding there, but I think she's married. Anyway, but whatever the case may be, President Trump and she had a lovely time in front of the press today, and she declared
Mhm.
that we needed to now have a make the West great again.
Mhm.
I'm I'm waiting for the hat. I want to get my hat. Make the West
Yeah.
great again. So I think that this might have been a signal, a way of signaling to the market. Look, Italy is slightly right wing.
Mhm.
They may be the future. We're seeing a lot of right wing activity all through Europe,
Yeah.
and that maybe that's the future, and that we might be looking at it won't be nearly as strong as MAGA, of course, but at least directionally, we might be looking to go that way. And if so, people would be coming on board with Trump fairly
Yeah.
quickly. She also talked about, she didn't like really say she'd be the emissary, but maybe she would be the spark that would get the Eurozone together if Trump would like to come over and have a meeting.
And talk about tariffs
There's right.
with Europe.
Yes.
I believe Europe knows that China, the way China does business, it's not really acceptable long term. We've accepted a lot of conditions that China's placed on people doing business in China. So like, 51% ownership, they for the domestic partner in China, basically you got to surrender that amount to a joint venture partner in China. That's not acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think even Europe has said, okay, China, if you want to set up shop in Europe, you got to have a 51% joint owner in Europe. Like they're
Yeah.
starting to float things like that.
Yeah.
So I think Europe will, even though they lean left and they want to fight the US as far as political correctness and censorship and regulation and all these things. I think that they're going to work out a deal with the US and also join forces with the US, Japan, South Korea, others to put pressure on China.
I was actually kind of amused. Larry Goldberg, of course, is quite the expert on India,
Hmm.
and a much bigger expert than I am on China, even though I've been buying from China for, I don't know what now, 40 years or something. My business partner was going into China before Nixon went to China. So I've had a long, long history with China. And but Larry even has, I think, a deeper understanding over there. Anyway, we did a series of videos. I want to say it was about 18 months ago, talking about the entire region and
Hmm.
China's relationship with these other countries. Now, it
Yeah.
turns out I think that China's number one trading partner in that region is actually Australia.
Hmm.
And they do a lot of trade with Japan. But there is no love lost between China and South Korea, no love lost between China and Japan, no love lost certainly not with Taiwan, no love lost with Australia. I mean, none of these
but
countries,
especially India.
and especially India,
Yeah,
none of these
India
like
does
China.
does not like China. China's been, pushing at the border in India. Um, it's good there hasn't been a war between China and India. Yeah, they're very strong rivals, and I think India is going to be with the U.S. when it comes to, trade with China.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that I've said this multiple times. So I'm sorry for those of you who watch every day. Thank you for watching every day. But I do think that that Trump is wise enough to know, and I know that he does because I know that he does the art of the deal. When you finish these trade negotiations with everybody across the world, the goal is for everybody to walk away feeling like they did okay.
Yeah.
You don't want anybody to think, oh my gosh, my country's in trouble now. You
Hmm.
want them to think that today, but you don't want them to think it at the end of the
Right.
negotiation. Everybody needs to feel like they won. And so I think he knows that that's his style, that's his thing. So ultimately, within the next 30 to 60 days, we can see a lot of good news.
Yeah. Yeah, there's pressure on all these countries. So, forget about China for now. Think about all these other countries. They have a 90-day window to make a deal with the US.
Right.
And that's if they don't make a deal in those 90 days, the threat is that they're going to go back to those high percentages on the little
On the
tote board
list.
that
Right.
Trump had. So I think we're going to be getting some deals, and if this all happens, Trump could go down as a great president. There'll be many who won't give him credit for it
Of course.
or
Yeah.
anything of the sort, but they're acting like he's bungling it now, and I don't, I, I don't think that's the case.
Well, they thought that last time too. So
Yeah.
speaking of bungling, Chair Powell bungled it yesterday. I happen to actually be a little bit of a Chair Powell fan. I kind of
Hmm.
like sometimes when he's in a good mood, when he's kind of up, I kind of like
Hmm.
listening to him. He has that calm, reassuring voice.
Hmm.
Yesterday, he was anything but reassuring.
Hmm.
I think he made Trump mad because I don't think he and Besant at their breakfast or this morning, whatever it was, I don't think that they had a conversation of that Powell was going to say, "Well, I'm a little worried about inflation and also depression. I mean recession,"
Hmm.
which is what he said during his conference. And of course, the
Yeah,
stock market, stagflation,
stagnation and inflation. Yeah.
and the stock market, as it does so often when Powell speaks, drops what 2.5% or whatever it was. So today, Trump was not happy. And he said, he was asked, well, are you going to fire Powell? And he said, well, if I ask him to resign, he will.
Hmm.
So what do you think? Do you think that he will ask Powell to resign, or do you think that 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 it's important enough to him to get that done, or do you think just let him ride it out?
Well, I've been saying on your show since November that Powell's been acting like a tenured professor. So a tenured professor at a university does and says whatever they want, and they can't be getting rid of. And that may be the case with Powell. So, Trump may be wrong. It may not be legal for him to get rid of Powell. He could certainly make life difficult for Powell, and um, you could bare minimum pester him and make his job just much worse. But um, I think the I think the Fed should be lowering rates. I do. Because I think we are potentially already in a recession just because people are freaked out about the tariffs. A lot of ships are not moving from China to the US.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of plans have been put on hold.
Mhm.
While we do have some big plans that are in the media from, very large companies, mega size companies like NVIDIA and TSMC and Apple. Um, while we have that, I think, a lot of small businesses are in some trouble right now, especially in China too.
Yeah, I think in China, that of course would be part of the reason why we might expect China to start moving a little closer to making a deal or getting
Yeah.
together. Trump did say during the meeting that he was confident that they would get a good deal with China. And a lot of people took that to mean that he knows more than he's saying. And it caused me to think it through, to think more deeply than I have over the last few days. I haven't heard anybody else say this, but Trump has, I'm sure he has 18 backdoor ways to know what's happening
Mm.
at the general council, whatever they call it, the Communist Party meetings. And because you've got people that meet with Chinese leadership all the time, and if you got enough people having enough conversations, they're going to report back to whoever it is that they report to get to Trump. So
Mm.
he's got to know what the feelings are over there, what the pressures they're feeling are, way more than we could even imagine, I think, don't you?
The pressure's high. There's going to be many bankruptcies in China, especially in manufacturing. And we don't know how much their banking system is reliant on manufacturing side. I think if China goes on too long, I believe they'll have a banking crisis,
Hmm.
and that could lead to a currency crisis. I don't think China can wait 3 months. And I think Trump knows how much pressure is going to be on China. And I think Besant, what is the person who broke the Bank of England,
Yeah.
he knows how to put pressure on a whole country. So, he was just an analyst in 1982 when he worked for George Soros and Stanley Druckenmiller, but he was the one who came up with the idea to break the Bank of England and how it would work. And I think the isolation they're putting on China and the uncertainty they're creating around, shipping of goods, it's has the potential to break China. So I think Trump understands this, and there's probably more to it, his confidence.
Yes,
I
yes.
agree, but I think it might just be as simple as that. They
Yeah.
could they could break the Bank of China, so to speak, in a
Well, the yuan is
metaphorical and somewhat literal way.
Yeah, well, the yuan is down pretty substantially. It was dropping. I don't know if it dropped today. And to a certain extent, if you are in a place where you're trying to have a competitive advantage, you like your yuan to be down. But at a certain point, somebody was pointing out as the yuan drops, then it makes the value of the real estate in China worth less in yuan.
Hmm.
And so when that happens, you have foreign investors and even even their local investors who have already been destroyed by the real estate market, who would even
Hmm.
be more inclined to want to get out of real estate and put their money in gold, which is what's been happening for the last 5 years. So this could end up, you could see, the yuan could be the leader, as you're pointing out, or it could be the banks that would be the leader.
Hmm.
It could be more of a real estate collapse. I mean, there's so many different things that could go wrong. I was just thinking
There's a term for what you're describing. It's called capital flight.
capital flight. Yes, yes,
You don't want a bunch of money being pulled out of your country,
right.
and that's what could happen to China.
Yeah. And when you're talking about China versus the United States in terms of the assets and the capabilities and the strength of the two countries, I mean, we're not even talking about something that's on the same level.
It- yeah, the US has a lot more power in this situation than China does.
Okay, well,
People are focused on the style of what Trump and his team is doing, or maybe that they don't seem to be on the exact same page, or that they're not telling them the whole playbook of what they're going to do. You don't tell your enemy or your negotiating partner what you're going to do.
yeah.
You wait and do it at the right time. You don't unveil it in advance. That removes your power, your leverage in the situation.
And to your point, when Besant destroyed or took advantage of a very big negative over in the UK, he could be looking at the same things we just talked about and even other things that we're
Mm.
not even aware of, that he knows that they've got these strangulation points where they could touch if they had to.
Mhm. And what's wild is, they could push China in a certain direction, and that could set in a chain of events that leads to like a culminating point, and then there's an expected uh resolution of that
Yes,
you can also take advantage of.
right,
That's
right.
what's crazy.
Yes,
It's
yes,
almost like you sell China now. I'm not recommending this as a trade,
right,
but
right, right.
you sell China now, and then they get broken. You buy China, and then it recovers.
Yeah. Yeah, so it'll be super interesting. Again,
Yeah.
the idea that we live in interesting times really just seems to duplicate every single day. I've lived a long, 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 long time. I've never lived in anything that I think you could compare to this. I do think that the closest comparison would have been the early Reagan years.
Yes, that's right.
When we had the inflation, when we had 21% interest rates, we had 15 or 16% mortgage rates. And
And a little known piece was that Reagan did some tariffs on Japan, or he threatened them,
oh,
and essentially quoted Japan so that they couldn't sell more into the U.S.
ah,
So that he created some quota tariffs or something like that with Japan, and that's part of what set that in motion.
yeah,
So
and then
it's possible we do get some inflation. Maybe the Fed is right, but we so I think maybe Jerome Powell fears a bit of a repeat of like 1982. But there were other things going on, like stuff with oil and
right,
things like
right.
that.
Oh no, the oil was the oil was the problem. That's how it started. And then
Mm,
of course, once you have this cycle of inflation, it's hard to get out of the cycle of inflation. But the oil was definitely how it got triggered. Yeah, and then of course, there was a lot of pain during the first year and a half of the Reagan administration, and Reagan was very unpopular during that time, and Volcker is still unpopular among many people because they got so hurt during that period of time,
mm.
and yet by the time that Reagan ran for reelection, he won 49 states. So sometimes you have to be a statesman.
Mm.
You step up, you do the right thing, and because you know it's the right thing, and then when you get through the pain, everybody says, "Hey, thank you very much."
So, question for you, be a little controversial for the
Okay,
end
sure,
here.
sure.
Do you think Trump will run as vice president
Oh, vice president.
in 4 years or so?
That's hilarious. Well, I think I had actually contemplated that at one point. It's coming back to me now, like 5 or 6 weeks ago.
Yeah. JD Vance could be president, Trump
Yeah,
could be
right.
vice
Vice
president.
president. Well, okay, so yeah, JD Vance would have to have as good, what I call as good an ego as Trump does. So people think about ego, oh, he's an egomaniac. No, he has an extremely strong ego. He
Hmm.
knows what he's capable of. He knows where his shortfallings are. If Vance has that strong of an ego, and he might, where he could recognize the advantage of having Trump as a vice president, knowing the potential for having two alphas in
Hmm.
situation, it might work. I wouldn't recommend it. I think you let Trump retire. He's earned it.
Well, let's talk about this topic again because I think it's interesting to think about.
Absolutely. We'll be happy to talk about it again. That's a pretty wild one. Okay, I got one last one for you, actually. What's going to happen with gold, or do you care? Do you follow it? I mean, I think it's way past its expiry date. It's out of over its skis,
Mm.
completely nuts, and that it has to fall. And you?
Yeah, I think my very simplistic thought about gold is you want to sell it at the point of maximum fear.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's already happened. And so I think the time is ripe if you're long a bunch of gold, that it's, what are you hoping for from here?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. What's the upside? Yeah. What's the
Yeah.
upside risk? It doesn't seem to be that good.
Now maybe the dollar continues to get weak
Yeah.
because maybe Trump does fix all these trade imbalances or reduce them, and that would reduce the need for as many dollars. And then that could, increase the relative value of gold. Um, but beyond that, the other thing you're hoping for is for rates to come down, but
Right.
gold's much higher than it was when we had 0% interest rates. So, what other rainbow
Ambulance.
scenario are you looking for? And I think gold's up like close to 100% or $1,000. Yeah, $1,000, so 50% in a
Yeah.
short period of time.
Yeah. It
It's
was up
better
40%
performing over
last
the
year.
last 20 years than the S&P 500.
Yeah.
So, what more do you want? So I think to hang on to your gold from here, this this is just my
Yes.
feeling. This
Yes.
is not
Yeah.
investment advice. I think it's pure greed to hang on to it. You know, pigs pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
Well, on that note,
Let's get right to the numbers.
we'll do it. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. All right. So, what about those numbers today? Well, it's a Thursday, so normally we would have some numbers. By the way, the VIX is under 30 again, so that is somewhat symbolic or emblematic that we might be getting a little bit of a break here. And we'll see what happens on Monday. But the Dow was down 527, which seems horrible, except it was down 700 at one point today. So it wasn't quite as bad. It did come down at the end of the day, after the talk that Trump had with the premier of Italy. NASDAQ is down only 20.71. Let me put these in percentages real quick. So Dow was down 1.33, NASDAQ down only 0.13. So the Dow was dramatically down compared to the NASDAQ. And the S&P actually finished up a tad, up 0.13, with Tesla finishing up down 0.07. I think that was all of 18 cents. And then the after hours, Tesla is fallen another 48 cents. So it was a really rough day for Tesla, but it was all over the place, but not nearly as volatile today. Other than the Dow, the rest were not nearly as volatile as it has been. This was an options expiry date, and also, of course, a short week with no market tomorrow. So people going into a 3-day weekend were probably at least thinking about where they wanted to be over a 3-day weekend. Which may have been why we had this little sell-off at the end. You've got these Magnificent Seven, was down, except for Apple. I usually give you a little bit, like NVIDIA, for instance, was down $3. And then the Cathie Woods were mixed, mostly green, actually. Okay, where did the bonds end up? By the way, Japan's inflation was just announced. It came in at 3.6, which was higher than what was expected. Bonds today up 5.4 basis points. This is not the direction, as you well know. If you know me, you know I'm all about the bonds. So we're sitting at 4.333. This is just not good. The 2-year up 1.4 basis points, and the 2-month up only 0.6 of a basis point. We've got oil. Last I checked was up, and it was up $2 at $64.45. I wouldn't expect that to continue. They're claiming again that it's all about the Iran sanctions. We're having meetings with Iran on Saturday. Once again, I think the U.S. is holding all the cards. I think Iran is going to have to deal. I just don't see how they get out of it. They've already dealt with Trump in the past. They know him well. I don't think they're going to play fast. I don't think they're going to take a lot of risks with Trump. Natural gas up only 0.03% today, sitting at $3.25. Gold down a little bit, $3,341. Holy mackerel. Silver up, I said it again. Silver down 1.32 at $32.54, and copper up 0.42, back up to $4.70, heading towards $5 again. The dollar mixed, and Bitcoin up 800 to 84,976. And again, staying very, very mellow, not a lot of up and down. And of course, there is no pre-market today. So that gives you pretty much across the board where things are standing right now. As I mentioned, I've got Cern Basher coming on at 7:45 tonight. Tomorrow you've got Larry and you've got Brian Wang. I mean, I also have a Brian White sitting in reserve too. Anyway, Brian's probably going to be on all weekend. So if you like Brian Wang, and I know he's got brand new stuff, it's always unique, it's always well researched. If you like him, I think he'll be on probably Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. So that should be fun. And yeah, what else should I like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And as always, it has been great talking to you.